Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for publishing since 2012. It's one of the highlights of the year for us in terms of our communication with the market and contribution to the overall gene pool, if you will, and of our market knowledge on what's going on. Again, it's an analysis of total losses, but also incidents from the previous year. Probably more importantly, we try to get into what our insights are based upon that data and what we see in our own business, and then a look forward as to emerging risks. So that's a quick overview of where we are. I'll hand it off now to Captain Rahul to take you through the start of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Rich, and good day to everyone from all over the place, wherever you are. Today, we're going to talk a lot in detail about the geopolitical risk. I will be touching upon the various aspects of it, but first, let's look at what do we have in terms of the analysis in safety numbers that we've had in the last year, 2024. Obviously, we also will compare the numbers for the last decade or so that we have been doing this report. But first, look at the executive summary. In the last 10 years, we've had 681 total losses in all. And in 2024, we had 27 total losses. The chart that you see gives you a description, a geographical description of where these losses have come up from different parts of the world, which I will talk to you a little bit about that in more detail in the next slide. So if you look at this slide, this is actually quite a remarkable slide in the sense that you can see the total losses, how they have declined over the last decade. So 2015, we had 105 total losses, and in 2024 we ended up with only 27 total losses. Now this is a fantastic safety record which the shipping industry has been maintaining the downward trend, as you can clearly see. Back in 20 years ago, we were having something like more than 200 ships being lost every year. But now we're down to a small number of 27, and this is down to a lot of great effort being done by the industry themselves, whether it's the IMO from a regulatory aspects, whether it's the classification society, whether it is the ship owners themselves taking initiatives on a lot of safety aspects, whether it's technology, whether it's on crew, recruiting, talent, training, and other aspects. But having said that, I think this is also very remarkable simply because what we have seen in the last few years has been a really tremendously difficult time for shipping and turbulent times for shipping in terms of the conflicts, the wars that we have seen. We've also seen the sanctions regime, which has been changing constantly. We've seen the tariffs now kick in, also the problems of shadow fleet and the risk that comes along with them. We have also seen decarbonization issues that are plaguing the shipping industry to some extent. The targets are very intensive, very aggressive, and ship owners need to do constant renovation on their fleets, on the technologies to adapt or not to adapt, and to have significant capital in it for these. So despite all this background, to achieve this number, it is actually quite remarkable. We look at it a little bit more in detail in the next slide on how these losses are coming from, where they're coming from. So if you see the regional distribution of these losses, last year we saw the British Isles, North Sea region to be topping the charts with 4, but actually sharing it with East Mediterranean and South China Sea as well, with all 3 regions having 4 losses in 2024. This is followed by Iceland and Northern Norway with 3 losses, Australasia with 2, similar with Bay of Bengal, South Atlantic, and then Arabian Gulf, East African coast, and Gulf of Mexico with 1 losses each. On the colored tabs on next to it, you can see how these numbers have changed from the previous year. And you can see there's been a marked improvement in East Mediterranean and South China Sea this year, with a reduction of 4 and 5 losses respectively. But on the right-hand side, you will see the overall 10-year trend of these losses from 2015 to 2024. And South China and Indochina region still tops the chart, as it has been topping in the last many, many years with 149 losses, followed by East Mediterranean and Black Sea with 109 losses. There are many reasons why we can attribute these large number of losses to South China and Indochina seas. I think it's very difficult to pinpoint to one reason, but a very heavy traffic in the region, a large number of smaller vessels within the region exposed to typhoons year on year could be some of the causes, but it is very difficult to pinpoint one particular aspect. On the next slide, we will look at the total losses from the types of vessel perspective. On the left, you can see out of the 27 total losses, we saw fishing vessels to be topping the chart with 10 losses. We are followed by cargo ships by 6, chemical and product tankers 3, ro-ro vessels 2, tankers 2, container vessel 1, and the rest of them are also in single 1 digit. The total causes of losses we have seen are consistently topping the charts as foundering or sinking of the vessel. We lost 12 vessels due to this cause last year, followed closely by fire and explosion with 7 losses, and machinery damage failure with 3 losses. And so overall, you see these different causes in different types of vessels. They haven't really changed over the years, especially on a long-term basis. We've seen foundering as the key risk due to which vessels have been lost, and always fire has been the key big issue. While some of the incidents haven't ended up in total losses, but fire still remains one of the key problems that we have in our industry, especially on larger vessels now. On the next slide, we'll look at the incidents. So apart from the total losses, as I was explaining earlier, we also look at the shipping incidents, the total number of incidents that happen, which are recorded across the globe and are reported. And there's a very clear trend on what these total incidents are. Machinery damage has been the single most largest incident in these incidents. So we recorded something like 3,300 incidents last year, but this is the distribution of how and where they are coming from. Machinery damage, not just last year, but as you can see, it has been the single most key reason why we have had incidents in the shipping industry. Something like 1,400 machinery damage incidents last year, and also for the last decade or so. If you look at the next slide, we'll see the incidents from a slightly different perspective as to how many they have been, from which regions they are coming in from. Now, There is an element of reporting here, which we have to take it with a pinch of salt, because some regions report a lot more incidents, some others do not. But these are the numbers that we have, and we track it year on year. And this year we've seen 3,310 incidents, which is 347 incidents more than what we had in 2023. Now, this represents something like 10 to 11% increase, which is highly concerning, especially when you compare to the overall trend of total losses, which has declined by as much as 75%. So British Isles leads the total number of incidents with 799 incidents, followed by East Mediterranean and Black Sea. And the similar two positions are held on a 10-year scale as well by British Isles and East Mediterranean, with both close to 5,500 incidents across the shipping industry. If we look at the next slide, we are going to go into now a little bit more about geopolitical risk and how they are impacting the shipping industry. And I think this is the single most important and key risk that the shipping industry is facing in the recent times. In the past 3 years, we have seen a significant escalation in geopolitical risk for shipping, with the war between Russia and Ukraine starting a few years ago, followed by the Middle East conflicts between Gaza and Israel, which caused the Red Sea to be pretty much a war zone, and then now more recent events of the Iran-Israel conflict, adding further complexity to the already troubled region and already geopolitical conflict landscape across the world. Now, as we all can imagine, war and geopolitical risk hotspots enhance risk for shipping, as seen with the attacks and seizures of vessels in Red Sea. We've seen quite a few of them in the last few years. The growth in the shadow fleet is another impact that we have seen, and the damage to some of the shipping infrastructure, not just the shipping infrastructure, but the subsea cables that have been allegedly being damaged by merchant vessels over the last year or so, also puts a layer of complexity into this, because now these sort of vessels are being drawn into, well, merchant vessels are being drawn into political conflict, and seizures and arrests have been made on allegations that these vessels have been involved in spying, which we haven't seen in the past as much. If we look at the left side of this slide, we focusing on one of the key aspects of the shipping choke points across the board. If you remember back in the day, a few years ago, we had the Panama Canal being in the news for the lack of water and depth for reducing the transits, but of course for political reasons as well, where there were talks of overtaking of the Panama Canal. But now we are looking at Straits of Hormuz, we are looking at South China Sea, we're also looking at the polar regions where the Northwest Passages and others are again in the political limelight from an aspect of control of who would love to control those regions. Now, the overall geopolitical risk aspects has really deteriorated in the last few months with the additional war that has been coming in, especially with the GPS spoofing that we have seen that has been happening extensively in the region. Last month, we probably saw more than 1,000 vessels being GPS spoofed, and that adds such a complex layer to already difficult navigational conditions in the region, where you are transiting narrow passages, and you are also maneuvering through heavy traffic in those regions. Now, mariners over the years have been used to different types of navigational instruments, but I think in the last 5 years, what we have seen is that has changed very much with the reliance on the technology, and most of the technology has one single element going through, and that is the GPS positioning system, which is connected to charts, which is connected to your AIS system, which is also connected to your radars now. And a loss of that system in a critical situation during closed water, coastal water navigations in high traffic density areas is very unsettling and can be a very high risk for the vessels around in that region. So for right now, at the moment, the GPS spoofing is still going on, although the movement of oil through the Straits of Hormuz has not seen that much of a sharp decline. In fact, in some cases, it has actually grown. But I think that the risks still persist, and I think it is such a big risk that we have already seen one incident which allegedly involved one of the shadow fleet vessels. But I think this risk is still persistent and can have very long-lasting effects if it is not managed carefully by the crew themselves and the administrations involved. In the next slide, we will see a little bit more about other geopolitical risks that are affecting. Now, the supply chains have been affected severely at repeated intervals since the times of COVID, but now since the time COVID was put in the background, we have had the global supply chains impacted by the trade wars that has been going on for the last year or so. We have seen a lot of tariffs being imposed and then taken back, then reimposed. And this means there's a huge amount of uncertainty for ship owners and shippers, cargo owners, insurers alike. And I think one of the key things that is really disliked by any market is uncertainty. Whether the tariffs are put in or not, the uncertainty behind it causes freight rates to fluctuate. We have seen freight rates fluctuating up and down for almost 2 years now because of various reasons, but mainly because of tariffs. And in some cases, it has been good for seafarers and good for ship owners. In most cases, it has been unsettling because a lot of suppliers now are thinking about realignment of their supply chains because of the goods are expensive in one condition, in one region of the world, they need to resource it. And we all know how difficult it is to realign or resource goods which are coming in from years and years and from one location to find another location. It is really unsettling for the trade across the world. On the right-hand side, we also have seen a record increase in the abandonment of seafarers and vessels at sea. Now, last week was the day of the seafarer, and we celebrated that day and provided tributes to all the seafarers across the world who have been running these ships. But one of the key problems that we have seen in the last year has been the significant increase in the ships which have been abandoned by the ship owners due to various reasons. Some of this are due to arrest. Some of these are due to the higher cost of running these vessels and ship owners, smaller, typically going bankrupt and not being able to provide wages, or in some cases, even food and basic necessity to seafarers on board. So we saw something like 87% increase in the number of seafarers who have been abandoned last year, and 136% increase in number of vessels that have been abandoned last year by the shippers. Now, seafarers are the lifeline of shipping, and shipping is the lifeline of global trade. For us to ignore this problem will be very detrimental to ourselves and the global trade. So this is one of the key issues that we also seeing this year rising its head exponentially more than what it was in the previous years. And we can only hope that shipping industry and others involved can come together to resolve these issues. I'll hand over to my colleague Justus for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Hello to everyone from my end. Yeah, so topics are troubling the industry and don't disappear, as we just heard from Rahul, and you are even coming on top. And one of the still existing issues are the cost of repairs. This, beside the fact that inflation rates have fallen significantly, the cost of repairs did not. The average gross loss ratio in hull and machinery ranks from 70 to 80%. So in the end of the day, a combined ratio close to 100% is the result, globally speaking, for hull and machinery. So I guess this gives all of us who are in that business a valid reason for prudent underwriting. Some contributing factors for repair costs being still high are rising steel prices, supply chain delays, more complex machinery, and also, as mentioned, tariffs. Next slide, please. Another factor for the rise in claims costs are older vessels. Why is that? So the rerouting slowed down the replacement of older tonnage. And longer transit times have led ship owners to keep their older vessels in the fleets, which could make potentially also commercially a lot of sense when we look at the fact that these older vessels are paid already, and also the freight rates are in many instances quite favorable. The average the average age of the world fleet grew by 3 years. So we are now at 23 average years of age in the year 2024. The reference 20 years comes from the times before the pandemic. The container ship capacity is in particular under pressure due to the longer trade routes. The use of these longer trade routes is also exposing these vessels to more heavy weather. And we could now ask the question, bearing in mind also the age, if these vessels may not be in the best state to operate safely in these rough environments. Next slide, please. Let's look a bit deeper into some numbers again. So here we see that 3,300 plus incidents were reported in 2024, which reflects a 10% up year on year. 250 of those incidents go back to fire and explosion, which is also a hefty increase by 20% over the course of 2024. It's also the highest number for a total decade. Close to 1,900 incidents go back to machinery damage or failure. So this cause of loss remains top amongst all, and 75% of marine incidents involved human error. So we could also ask if this is a reflection of war for talent and also showcasing possibly lack of training in times of higher complexity, in terms of technique and machinery on our vessels globally. So with this, I hand over to Marcel to give some insights on cargo.
Hi everyone, I'm Marcel Ackermann. I'm the Global Product Leader for Cargo and also head up the Technical Office and CEO Marine based out of London. The topics which have been covered by my colleagues and that are also covered in the report are relevant across all marine classes, including cargo. And cargo in particular, the geopolitical situation, the tariffs, extreme weather events, fires on container vessels, and general leverage as a result of machinery damage, all major drivers affecting cargo. But in addition to that, I would like to highlight two areas which are a concerning trend that we've seen over the last 12 months. The first one is a significant increase in theft claims, and the second topic is unsuitable vessels being used to move project cargo. Starting with the theft claims, we saw a very significant increase in theft claims, in particular in North America. Theft claims in 2024 have been up by more than a quarter compared with 2023. And that's obviously a very concerning trend affecting customers in different ways. For some businesses, we have seen a multiplication of the losses that these clients have seen. And unfortunately, it's not a trend that is just in North America. We see similar trends in Europe, Asia Pacific, Latin America. It really is global. And most likely there is a correlation between the increase in uncertainty in the economic conditions, still the stubborn inflation that persists, and the cost of living crisis, which probably also fuels crime. The stolen goods, they range from what we typically see, the highly attractive cargoes like electronics, tobacco, designer clothing, pharmaceuticals, etc. But not just that. I think the biggest increase, actually, I think we have seen in everyday household items like foodstuff, household goods, cosmetics, clothing, anything really that can be sold easily. And we also find interesting is the biggest increase in these theft claims are probably on accounts with less risk management or where procedures that the companies have set have not been followed. Therefore, good risk management acts as a strong deterrent and directs thieves towards cargoes that have less measures in place to protect them and become an easier target. What we're also observing is a change and thieves becoming more sophisticated and have shifted from probably the traditional opportunistic approach to now a more clearly targeted approach, and a strong increase of theft claims that involve false identity, or use of fraudulent documents to access the cargo, or redirect them to a different receiver. So this can range from someone producing wrong logistics documents, redirecting lorries to a wrong warehouse, pretending to be the legitimate receiver, and so on. So much more sophisticated thefts compared to what we have seen in the past. So therefore, we think training, strong procedures and controls can be very effective to prevent such losses. And obviously that these measures need continuous review and adaptation to stay ahead of the criminals. And our risk control team is there to support our customers and to help them to navigate in this more challenging world, and obviously to share experience that we're gaining across a wide range of geographies and a wide range of cargoes in this field. The next topic I would like to focus on is very different, and it's related to a very exciting opportunity in the energy transition into clean energy, where there has been very strong investments in the green energy projects, which have grown to 2 trillion investment last year, and hopefully will continue to grow and accelerate in the coming years and double to 4 trillion by 2030 in order to meet the net zero targets by 2050. That gives great opportunities for those involved in the logistics chain, but also for us as cargo insurer in order to support our customer on this increased volume of shipments. But it also brings its challenges in addition to the opportunities with already existing capacity constraints on specialist cargo vessels. Project cargo, as many of you know, involves high-value goods and specialized equipment, often oversized, like wind turbines, components for battery storage facilities, and other critical infrastructure components. High values and the associated costs for delays make the potential for very large claims should the cargo be damaged or lost, as often as these items are not easily replaceable with long lead times, causing additional costs for our insureds. China is a large exporter of cargo equipment and is also the biggest importer of dry bulk commodities, which creates an interesting challenge, and that's the return rate for the bulkers. We see very competitive rates for exports and dry bulk vessels, and that, coupled with the capacity constraints and specialist vessels, has led to a substantial increase in dry bulk vessels being used for the export of project cargo. Dry bulk vessels have not been designed to carry such freight, and this poses additional risks, in particular during the loading and unloading operation, and also the safe storage of the goods on the vessel in order for the cargo not to move or being damaged as a result, for example, of heavy sea or just the general strains of a long sea voyage. And now, as highlighted also with the geopolitical situation, often voyages being longer and going around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, and those difficulties also adding additional challenges to move this cargo. And again, I think this is an area where our risk control engineers have great experience and work with our clients to make sure cargo is safely stowed and cargo is safely moved to reach its destination in an undamaged fashion. That's and we're obviously more than happy to use our expertise in this area to work with the clients and help them with it. And I think with that, I hand over to Regis for the claims detail.
Thank you, Marcel. I cannot agree more with what you said about cargo theft. As highlighted during our webinar last year, theft continued to be the standout trend for cargo claims. Geopolitical tensions also continue to have an impact on our claims activity. We have seen a clear increase in war risk claims in recent years and have settled several total losses for vessels under war risk cover related to Ukraine, mostly for vessels trapped in Ukrainian ports and waters. Such incidents can result in total loss under war risk cover, war insurance cover. This is a classic form of war cover. If a vessel is detained beyond a certain period of time, typically around 12 consecutive months, the owner can claim for a total loss. Such blocking and trapping clauses were, I would say, rarely used in the past. The trend has significantly changed over the last 2 years. The Red Sea continues to be a dangerous shipping area in the context of the Middle East tensions and conflicts. Yemen Houthis movement has recently ended a ceasefire with the US that was negotiated last month in May. A few days ago, a spokesman for Yemen Houthis told the Wall Street Journal that their organization is not bound by the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran, and that military operation against Israel would continue until attacks against Gaza stops. Those war risk cases generate long and difficult claims handling. For instance, after 14 months now, the vessel MSC Harris is still detained by the Iranian authorities. Following diplomatic actions, the crew and cargo were released last year, but Iran continues to detain the vessel. We can move to the next slide, please. Fire and misdeclared cargo remain top concern for large vessels. Large vessel fires, particularly on container ships and car carriers, are still a major concern for hull and cargo insurers. More than 100 total losses of vessels have been caused by fires over the past decade. Misdeclared cargo remain a chief contributing cause to container ship fires, despite growing awareness. There have been several serious incidents involving fires since the beginning of 25, after, I would say, a more calm year last year. In February, Grimaldi's vessel, the crew of the Grimaldi's Conroe Grande Brazil, abandoned ship and the car carrier and cargo vessel caught fire on February 18 in the English Channel and lost power. Just days later, another Grimaldi car carrier, the Grande Congo, caught fire in the Atlantic, although the incident was soon brought under control. More recently, on the 3rd of June, fire broke out on board the car carrier Morning Midas en route from China to Mexico, loaded with around 3,000 vehicles, 800 which are electric, or which were electric, more precisely. The crew had no choice but to abandon ship. It took almost 2 weeks to get tugs with firefighting means on site. The ship finally sank on the 24th of June. This is a scenario comparable to that of the car carrier Felicity Hayes 3 years ago. On the 9th of June, whilst sailing off Kerala coast, India, the container vessel Wanhai 503 sustained an underdeck explosion followed by fire spreading on board. The crew evacuated ship, but unfortunately 4 are still missing. The last we heard, the vessel was being towed with the fire under control and looking for a port of refuge. The bigger the vessel, the larger the potential loss. In most cases, the crew abandons the ships, and firefighting, salvage, and difficulties finding a port of refuge are all harder for large vessels. That remains the reality. Salvage cost and general average contribution remain at a high level. On top of that, repair cost, as mentioned by Justus remain high, I would say, with no sign of them returning to pre-pandemic levels. Storage risk for cargo mainly is a static risk exposed to fires and natural catastrophes. So the natural catastrophes, more and more frequent and intense, is a trend impacting inland marine and cargo in storage. They are actually static risk more vulnerable to cat event and also to fire losses. Extreme weather is one of the largest cost of loss across all line of insurance, especially property lines, but also marine. With more modern forecasting, a vessel can avoid dangerous weather conditions, but cargo stored in warehouse and in port in static risk, with potential very large accumulation of exposure. Storms, tornadoes, and floods have caused losses from marine cargo insurers in recent years, such as last year's devastating floods in Brazil, and again this year several cat events in US. Man-made losses also present a large accumulation of cargo exposure. Last year, for instance, as Allianz, we saw 2 separate large cargo claims for warehouse fires involving flammable goods. I leave now the floor to Rich Soja for the conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Regis, and thank you, gentlemen, for a very succinct review of our report. So how does this all come together as respects, how do the trends impact the future for marine insurance for the next 12 months, and what's the outlook for the market? Really an impossible question to answer with precision. From a pricing perspective, there may come a day with artificial intelligence where reported cargo thefts achieve a certain level, which then result in the next day a change in how highly attractive theft commodities are underwritten. There may come a day with artificial intelligence where a missile is fired from one country into another country, which then results in an automatic pricing change. Today is probably not that day. I think we're a long way away from perfect correlation between emerging risks and how the insurance market responds. And I think that's also appropriate. The influence is not just from emerging risks and trends, but also other dynamics. And the value that an insurance carrier brings to the transaction is part of it. The performance of one risk over another in terms of risk management procedures, which has been mentioned, is another factor in the equation. So I think all of us on the call, if you're involved in the purchase and/or sale or providing of insurance, recognizes that it is a more competitive market than it was 12 months ago, which is reflective of a variety of issues. But I think what we've spoken about today will, in pockets, influence that moving forward in terms of a certain type of risk, perhaps not being as competitive as others, simply because there are trends that are concerning as respects the carrier's ability to make money. So speaking for ourselves, obviously we've been in it for a long time. We're going to continue to be in it for the long time. I think most carriers take a long-term view of things, but some of what's been mentioned today is really important to keep an eye on to see how it develops in the near future. So with that said, I think we're about right on time. We're going to open up the polls, if you will, for questions from the participants on the call, whether it be from Captain Rahul, Regis, Justus, Marcel, or myself. And as you post your questions on Slido, they'll show up here, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So don't be shy. All right, starting off, how is war insurance market responding to recent events in the Middle East? Justus, do you want to tackle that one?
So we see quite a dynamic, but so far war insurance rates did not increase so much compared to the time when the Red Sea conflict started. So we see the war market is reacting, but not that harshly for the time being. And this is valid for cargo as well as for hull insurance.
And there's a very vibrant war market that still exists. We've not seen a withdrawal of capacity. With that said, the individual rates through individual regions are also quite robust, depending upon the level of conflict. All right, next question. There was much talk about U.S. port fees for foreign vessels earlier in the year, but this has been superseded by tariffs. What do you think will eventually happen in this area? Not sure I want to pick anyone in particular. Anyone want to comment?
Maybe a small comment, and I think it's extremely difficult to predict what's going to happen in this area because this has been such a very quick and fast-moving target. We saw in the beginning that all the Chinese-built and Chinese-affiliated vessels and their owners were going to be subjected to heavy fees and whenever they're visiting U.S. ports, but then it has changed already. What we know is from the executive orders issued, there's going to be a major master plan to reaffirm the maritime dominance of the United States. And that plan will be drafted. It is in the process of being drafted and will be presented to the authorities in the next month or so. And once that is revealed as to how exactly they plan to implement some of those measures by which they wish to reduce the dominance of the Chinese market in the maritime field, we will probably know. I think we need a crystal ball to really say what exactly is going to happen. But as I said in my short conversations earlier, that what this brings in is more uncertainty till the time we know exactly how much and what is going to be targeted for tariffs or fees. And for a planning purposes for a ship owner or a cargo owner, it becomes extremely more difficult to plan for an economical way of doing trade. And I think that's the biggest loser in this game.
And Rahul, I believe we're going to stick with you for this one. How will the challenges of the current geopolitical environment impact the industry's decarbonization targets?
That's a good question in the sense that we had seen in the last few years a lot of momentum in decarbonization initiatives from across different parts of the industry, whether it was coming in from the funding perspective. There were a lot of green funds, there were a lot of banks and other financial organizations willing to put a lot of money into this, and which did happen. And over the last year or so, due to all these geopolitical crises, conflicts, the environment has changed significantly in the sense that the focus from decarbonization has shifted, and it is probably not the top priority agenda for everybody in the market as of now. Now, this is unfortunate, but you have to understand that decarbonization is a very long-term game. We are talking about 20, 30 years now. So in my view, this is a temporary distraction from the decarbonization targets. I think they will still be squarely in the agenda of most of the shipping companies. With IMO passing the new requirements earlier this year, I think they don't even have a choice. So we do firmly believe that the decarbonization targets will still go on. They will still be funded. They will still be acted upon. But it may take a little bit longer. The industry will have to avoid those distractions and get a bit more stability in the market in general to come back to the bigger decarbonization targets and the focus that it needs.
Thank you, Captain Rahul. Next question. What is the underwriting view of transporting batteries on vessels given recent events? Marcel, maybe you can add a few comments there.
I think batteries are there to stay. I think there is more and more products that include lithium-ion batteries, other than cars, obviously, and also in the green energy projects related to solar farms or wind farms in order to store energy. Our view is it's also a question of having the right procedures in place. We have formed an expert team in the company with risk engineers from various classes of business, where we have also a strong representation from a marine engineer, and they look specifically at procedures in order to prevent fires in relation to the movement of batteries. So it is something that we do support, but we're strongly looking to work with the customers to make sure the procedures minimize the risk as good as possible.
Rich, if I may add a little bit on this. I think this is a very big topical subject right now, and it's being debated at various levels, including at the IMO level. The carriage of electric vehicles or any kind of vehicle which having lithium-ion batteries, which we all know are susceptible to very high intensity fires, is being debated across, and there is a lot of work that has been going on at IMO level on fire safety. Now, as Marcel said, that there's no chance of any downturn on lithium-ion batteries usage across the world. The industry is going more and more 30% plus every year. So we are going to see this, whether it's in containers or whether it's batteries themselves or equipment carrying these batteries or EVs, electric vehicles themselves. But I think what we need to focus on is on protection measures on board vessels. Now, there's been a lot of discussions on what is the right method of fighting such fires. We know very clearly that these fires are much more difficult to fight. They can reignite much later after being extinguished in the first instance. Hence, we saw a couple of examples of vessels which had to be abandoned after weeks of being, firefighting efforts being done by the salvors on board. So there, we are talking about whether CO2 is the best way of extinguishing these fires. We are arguing about whether it's the water that immersion of these batteries in water is the right way of extinguishes or getting these fires in control. But the answer today is still not clear. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. From our perspective, insurers are there to support the industry. However, we would expect the ship owners and other segments of the industry to take a diligent view, a more responsible view on how do we control these fires and how do we firstly prevent, and then the firefighting measures on board the ships needs to be a lot more stringent than they are today.
And thank you, Rahul. And before we leave that topic, Regis, any commentary on the claims implications of these incredible fires that are starting?
Yeah, Rich, I could, in addition to what Rahul said, I think, yes, one of the key thing is to have a increased cooperation, discussion with all stakeholders, of course, with our insured brokers, and at also the international organization level, but also with the salvage company. And we know that I was in a conference last week, and one of the largest, maybe the largest salvage company replying to a question from the audience, clearly said that, as Rahul said, for the time being, we don't have the solution to extinguish fire from electric cars or lithium. So yeah, for us, it's very frustrating, because there is not really a lot of things we can do, on the claim side. We have to rely on the salvage company, to rely on what, even now we cannot. In the past, the crew could do something, in the first hours. Nowadays, they leave the vessel very quickly. So it's a very frustrating, but much more, yes, cooperation, training, and everything also. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, what is your view on the increasing tension between China and Taiwan, and what kind of impact would a military conflict have on global shipping, insurance, and supply chains? I open it up to the group.
Maybe I'll have a first go. I think the whole South China Sea region, where this conflict, if it does happen and if it does become a major military conflict, will play, is one of the key shipping lanes for a lot of traffic which comes out of Singapore or comes through Singapore going westwards from China, Japan, Korea, and all those big markets. And I think the issue there is going to be that how much of this conflict will affect the shipping lanes. Now, we always have this region is a little more wider and open, as long as you can make your way to the Straits of Singapore, which is one of the key regions of and main traffic routes. Now, if something happens which gets Straits of Singapore into a problem like the Straits of Hormuz today is, or in the Red Sea like the Suez Canal, then I think that will be a huge impact on shipping, because that region connects the east and the west, so to say, in a very important manner. I think there'll be still alternatives, like we have seen in the Red Sea crisis, that to avoid the Suez Canal, routes have been taken down south from the Cape of Good Hope going all the way across, and similar things might happen if that conflict does erupt. But fingers crossed, hopefully that never happens.
Thank you, Rahul. What actions are being taken to reduce misdeclared cargo? Is better technology a solution? So I'll start out with a couple of comments and then open it up. There's at least one vendor out there. There are several, but there's at least one vendor out there who has upped their game as respects technology in terms of being able to discover misdeclared or undeclared cargo to better assist ship owners in identifying stowage patterns and red flags, whether it be hazmat material, hazmat concerns, or other. So there are technological solutions that are in play, that are improving, and that are becoming more widely used. Any other comments, Rahul, or others on that issue?
I think, as you rightly said, Rich, that initiative uses AI technology to find patterns and which could lead to detecting misdeclared cargo from different regions. Now, I think the problem is very extensive and very hard to solve. So that one particular initiative is really great, that at least we have found a means of trying to find out misdeclared cargo, or indications of it at least, from hundreds and thousands, rather millions of shipments that go around across the world. The problem is to control shippers who are spread across different regions and correspond to different authorities and different rules and regulations. It is very hard to find a way, a simple measure to do this. I think the CTU code, which is still unfortunately a voluntary code, it is not a mandatory code. If at some point of time it does become mandatory, that will go in a long way to address this problem. But as of now, this is a problem which is still there, because it is the scope of the problem is extensive and it's spread wide all across the world, across jurisdictions.
Thank you. Justus, I may send this your way. Should we expect shipping incidents to increase over the coming years as the aging fleet is difficult for ship owners to replace due to growing waiting lists at shipbuilders and their supply chain difficulties due to geopolitics?
So maybe not to give a blunt general answer, older vessels create significantly more losses. That is a fact, yes, in parts, but it's also a matter of maintenance of these vessels, right? So as long as an older vessel is well maintained, which costs money and is not only used to generate money by trading, this can be under control for a certain period of time. But when we see that vessel age on average is already at 23, my view is that if this trend should continue, we will see a lot more partial losses, at least, driven by the age of vessels. And we should also differentiate between aging vessels by type. So are these vessel types exposed to difficult weather in terms of routing? Are these vessel types highly specialized builds, which are running longer than average just by nature because of design and specialization? I think this is also a point we need to be a bit careful when we try to judge or forecast. But for sure, if this trend continues, we will see an increasing trend of partial losses and also claims costs.
Thank you, Justus. Next question. We've seen a number of port explosions involving storage of hazardous cargo. What impact is this having on risk assessment and the claims environment?
I think maybe I'll start off with it. You know, from a cargo point of view, obviously, cargo owners often haven't got a choice where exactly their cargo will be stored in a port area, or through which area of a port a cargo will go, and they can only control their own cargo, but are also exposed to cargoes from other people over which they have no control of. So this topic is very much concerning, obviously, with the Tianjin explosion and the Beirut explosion in recent history. And I think there is the ports, the individual ports that are tightening up their procedures in order to make sure they reduce the risk in this area. But we have limited control, I think, other than the control we can, have with the support that we can give to the cargo that we insure. But the exposure goes beyond that. Maybe Rahul or Regis can add to it.
No, I fully agree, Marcel. And this is something I mentioned earlier. Yes, part of those what I like to name static risk. So we are more vulnerable to explosion and fires and that cat event. And for I would say the same thing in port, like on the vessel, our cargo interest cannot control everything. The way the containers, the cargo are stored on the vessel, the same in the port. Rahul, I don't know if you have more positive and optimistic feedback to give.
Well, I think considering the impact these explosions can have we have seen in the past with some up to $1 billion, from a risk assessment perspective, I think this is something more relatively new and on our radar, and we need to go into a lot more detail now. We are having to go into a lot more detail on understanding how these risks can impact us, and how do we firstly assess this, because it is so diverse. To know what cargo is stored in a port is almost very difficult. So we are having to find out new ways and means of measuring this exposure if we can. I think this will be a challenge.
Thank you, gents. We have 1 minute left, and it would be horrifically cruel for me to assign the next question to any one of the panelists, so I'll take it. In view of the significant climate change and heavy weather, how can parametric insurance play a role in hull insurance? Really interesting question. We have reviewed from a marine perspective internally a parametric opportunity recently, and have gotten involved into the legal and compliance and claims issues associated with such a product. My personal opinion, and Justus, feel free to jump in, but my personal opinion is I don't know to what extent there's going to be a huge demand for this right now, simply based on the fact of the availability of affordable hull insurance market as it stands. So parametric insurance has in the past in other lines of business really been a gap to step in where the market, the traditional market, has been more restricted or too expensive. So I don't know to what extent it has a future in the product suite for providing insurance for hull products. But it's a really interesting question. Justus, any final thoughts on that?
I mean, for us, it's crucial to build up a long-standing relationship with our clients via our producing partners. And if we think about a parametric hull insurance, I think this would not be really sustainable in terms of relationship and long-term play. So it's a question of a business model. Is that a more opportunistic trading model, or is it more a sustainable long-term play model? And I think we are more for the latter.
Excellent point. And on that, I will close out the session. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for everyone who has joined us for this, what was hopefully an illuminating session. We appreciate your support and interest, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.